There is a problem on our boat, one we have never really talked about. Since we left the Canary Islands, our toilet hasn't worked. So we crossed the entire Atlantic with just a bucket. Since leaving the Canaries, we have sailed more than 4,000 nautical miles, an entire ocean, several countries, countless days at sea. And that's exactly why we're here now, in Trinidad, on a shipyard, with our boat perched on stilts, and a very long list of things that need fixing. A year ago, we set off from Europe with our small steel sailboat. Our plan was simple: cross the Atlantic, and eventually arrive somewhere in the Caribbean. No big crew, no big budget, just the two of us. From the Canary Islands, we sailed to Cape Verde. From there, we crossed the Atlantic to Brazil, and then continued north along the coast of South America. And now, after 8 more days at sea, we finally reached the Caribbean. In the morning, we have to start the engine. The wind has completely died, probably blocked by the island. After all these days of sailing with wind, it feels almost strange to rely on the engine. Up ahead, we have to round one more corner, and it will still take a little while before we reach it. But from that point on, a completely new chapter of our journey begins. A chapter where our boat will be lifted out of the water, and we will have time to repair, sand and paint. And also, in this very place, we will finally fix our onboard toilet, after months of relying on our faithful little blue friend. The closer we get to the entrance, the more stunning the landscape becomes. It feels as if we're slowly sailing into a paradise.
Und so grün. Und dann noch mit dem Regen. Wow. Hallo Karibik. Und so viele Vögel und Pelikan und es ist einfach so viel Leben, nachdem wir nie etwas gesehen haben, wirklich. Flugkrieg. On the platform.
Heavy rain clouds hang over the green hills. Large flocks of birds sweep overhead, and the hills seem almost to be steaming with life. Pelicans glide past our boat, calm, graceful and silent.
Hat ein Fisch im Schnabel.
After weeks on the open Atlantic, this coastline feels unbelievably alive. For a moment, we just stand there and take it all in. But reality returns faster than we had expected. Just around the next corner, the first oil platform appears. On the horizon, a whole line of massive tankers lies at anchor. And as we get closer, we spot a large military base right by the water. And behind it lie the 3 big harbors of Trinidad. It's not quite the picture we had imagined. Not that perfect Caribbean postcard scene. It feels industrial, raw and loud. And yet, in a strange way, it is still beautiful, because all of it is framed by those tall, deep green hills rising around the bay. When we sailed to Trinidad, there was really only one thing we knew for sure, that the boat had to come out of the water. By then we had quite a long list of things that needed fixing, like the underwater hull, we had some technical issues, and of course our onboard toilet, which hadn't been working for like almost a year. After all the time relying on our blue bucket, the thought of finally repairing it was honestly not the worst motivation. But what we didn't realize at that point was just how much work actually was waiting for us. So the next day we were standing in the yard's office, Christmas decorations were hanging everywhere, and through the window I could see palm trees and the sea, which somehow felt both like tropical and completely surreal at the same time. So while the Caribbean heat sits heavy outside, we were signing form after form. There were surprisingly many of them, and one even asked quite seriously whether we are smuggling people. Of course no, just a broken toilet.
That's okay. Yeah. You have plenty to see.
Yeah.
Còn một vài lối bích.
And then it happens. The giant crane rolls slowly over our boat. A diver jumps into the water and attaches the slings. Moher is lifted out of the water, and suddenly our home is simply hanging in the air. It's a very strange feeling. everything suddenly feels a little different. For the first time we see our boat properly from underneath, and it's a strange sight. From below, it looks much bigger than it ever did on the water, wider, more massive, almost a little cumbersome, as if our familiar home has suddenly been transformed into a huge, unfamiliar object. Even getting back on board feels unusual. Instead of stepping up from the dinghy as we normally would, there's now a long ladder leaning against the hull. Step by step we climb, and when I finally reach the railing and look down, I only then realize just how high up we actually are. The view down suddenly seems astonishingly deep. On dry land, the railing takes on a completely different meaning.
So, was ist passiert?
Habe ich Angst, hä?
Hast du Angst?
Ja.
Vor was?
Dass wir abstürzen.
Es fühlt sich unhöher, also ist schon komisch.
Bei dem Dschungel, das ist noch schön, wir haben einfach Glück im Dschungel.
And yet, it's still beautiful here. We're standing almost in the middle of the jungle, looking out over all the greenery, the trees, the nature around us. They have placed us at the very edge of the yard, because apparently we'll make too much dust, too much noise, and bother the others later. But honestly, we don't mind at all.
Was auch mega komisch ist.
And then comes the first night. Our boat stands on stilts, firmly supported on the yard's ground. Not a single bit of rocking. After all those weeks on the Atlantic, this absolute stillness feels almost eerie.
Es hat sich so schräg angefühlt das erste Mal und es hat dann ein bisschen gewackelt in der ersten Nacht, als es geluftet hat.
Sometimes a gust of wind sweeps across the yard, making the boat shudder for just a moment, barely noticeable, almost imperceptible. And yet every time it makes me pause and wonder if that's normal, if the supports might settle a little over time. Of course, we know the boat is safe here. Everything is tightly secured, braced and fastened. Nothing can really go wrong. And yet, somewhere in the back of my mind, there's a small, quiet feeling of unease. Maybe because it's our home, or maybe simply because everything has become unusually still.
Ja, und sonst im Moment, es ist überall Chaos.
Over the next few days, we spend our time slowly finding our bearings. We explore the sites, taking note of where everything is, from supply stores to the offices, and begin getting everything organized.
Ich hoffe, wir haben einen Monat und dass wir dann weg sind, dass wir alles geschafft haben.
We make a list of tasks, sort through the materials, and plan which jobs to tackle first. Slowly we start taking on the first projects, small repairs here, sanding and preparations there, all to bring our boat back into shape.
Let's go! Yeah.
And somewhere in the middle of all these projects, our most important mission is still there, the onboard toilet. After weeks with our blue bucket, it's really starting to feel like it's time for an upgrade. Not a particularly glamorous project, but a necessary one.
Alles Rohr wegnehmen.
But as so often on a boat, it never stays a simple, small repair. Soon we discover more pipes that are clogged, filters completely rusted through, and hoses that smell like the entire Atlantic. What started as just a few extra fixes quickly turns into an endless to-do list that seems to grow by the day. Each new task reminds us that we have taken a much bigger challenge than we have ever imagined.
Eva ist draussen am Grinden. Wir haben jetzt alles, was wir brauchen.
Just at first we thought we could get away with just applying a fresh coat of anti-fouling, but no. We discovered a few rusty spots and suddenly the entire paint job needed to be redone. Everything had to be sanded down to bare metal and then rebuilt from scratch. Much more work than we had expected. So we get a quote for sandblasting, $3,500 just for the hull. Way more than we can afford. So we make a decision, we'll do it ourselves. Sanding, cleaning, painting, day after day. Until it's done. In the evenings we sometimes just sit on our boat, on stilts, completely still, no rocking. Only the wind making the boat tremble ever so slightly at times. And for a moment I find myself wondering, do we really know what we're doing here? But that's exactly why we are here. Not just to sail, but to learn, to truly understand a boat. Many people associate sailing with turquoise waters, palm trees and perfect sunsets. The reality is different. A large part of this life takes place right here. In shipyards, among tools, rust and a to-do list that seems never ending. And it's here that we are truly learning what it means to live on a boat and take full responsibility for our floating home. So see you next time.